afternoon. Welcome to the course on systems engineering. Today we are going to talk about the systems design process, and I am Dr. Deepak Philip from IIT Kanpur. So today's learning objectives, we are discussing slightly about different version of the system design process used in non-defense industries. The central aspects are all the same, but there are some slight variations. We will discuss that. So we'll talk about an overview of the system design process as DP. So as DP stands for system design process. This stands for system design process. System design process. Okay. And then we also talk about what's the stakeholder expectations and who are stakeholders and how do we talk about expectations. We will also talk about high level requirements and why are they important in the system design process. And we also talk about how do we translate the high level requirements into functional and logical decomposition and how this document aids in the development of the system. And then we will also talk about the design and product breakdown structure. When we talk about PBS, it's the product breakdown structure. Remember, in WBS stands for work breakdown structure. Similarly, PBS stands for product breakdown structure. And then we finally talk about the stuff called CONOPS or concept of operations. And what is it? And we will see this quickly. So the system design process in a simplest sense is a 4 independent, highly interactive, iterative and recursive process. So there are 4 processes that are interdependent. So that means they are dependent on each other. That's the interdependency. Iterative, we already seen the iterative and recursive definitions. This is highly iterative. So the same function applied over until a functionality is met. This is to ensure functionality. We ensure functionality out of this. And the recursion on the other hand is drilling down or decomposition into lower levels or bundling up to higher levels. Okay. And processes. So there are 4 interdependent, iterative and recursive processes, and when you use these processes as part of this DP, these processes result in what you call as a validated set of requirements and validated design solution. It's validated set of requirements and validated design solution. What is it validated against? The validation is always against stakeholder expectations. So when you say it's validated, that means it will satisfy. The idea is will satisfy stakeholder, or let's for the time being we use the word customer as synonymous. We will explain this later, expectations. And so we talked about there are 4 processes. Which are those 4 processes? The first process is about develop stakeholder expectation. How do we develop the stakeholder expectations from the input? And then we establish the technical requirements. Then we talk about the logical decompositions and the design solutions. These are the 4 processes. So they are interdependent. So if you make these processes as the 4 processes P1, P2, P3, P4, so they are dependent like this, they are also dependent like this, so all sort of dependencies do exist between them. Okay. And this at the end of the day will generate the design solutions that are required as part of this document. Okay, so what we try to do today in the lecture is to diagrammatically establish diagrammatically establish the recursive and iterative relationships among 4 processes. This is the aim of the lecture today. So, in that way you all get a complete overview of what the system is about. So, we will start with the schematic and we will start with the simple way to look into the process. So, the schematic always starts with the needs, wish, missions, wants, etc. So, this is where the starting point. Somewhere some needs have been established. So, who establishes this? Initially, let us call this as a customer or a end user. It could be anybody, it could be an organization, it could be an individual. So, it could be a organization, it could be an individual, it could be a country, many things. Okay. That can all be part of this what you call as a customer or the end user. So, somewhere somebody specifies that there is a need or there is a wish or there is a mission to be fulfilled or there is a want that is significant enough that a new system need to be developed. So, this is the starting point. Once you have this, from there we generate what we call as a stakeholder expectations. So, the term stakeholder is usually quite confusing in this regard, and I will try to explain later what it is, but the stakeholder in a broader sense is usually divided into two. One is the customer, the stakeholder can be thought about as a customer and or customers, and all other interested parties is the second part. So, we will see how do we distinguish among customers and all other interested parties as part of this proposal. So, the stakeholder expectations gets derived out of the needs, mission statements and wants that are created by the customer. Then it has 3 major parts in it. The first part is actually called as the systems objectives and constraints. So, sometimes people also call this as the mission objectives and constraints. So, if you talk about a development of a field artillery gun, the main objective is to deliver an artillery round to a specified range within the shortest time with high accuracy. If we say something like this, this could be the objective of artillery round that we are trying to define. So, the mission objectives and constraints to a large extent comes from the needs, wish and missions which are specified by the customer to begin with. The constraints would be in what are the limitations within which the system should operate. Sometimes it could be like it could be operate in a hilly terrain, or it could be operate during rain, it could operate during all weather conditions. This is all part of the constraints aspect. The other aspect is the operational objectives. So, the system objective might have been develop a system like this, but then the operational objective could be something like we could add something like with minimal manpower, okay, quick delivery of fire, easy to move, something like this. So, these could be operational objectives which on the top gets added by the customer into this process. Okay. And once you specify the operational objectives, you also have something called a criteria, success criteria. This is the criteria by which the mission success will be defined or evaluated. This is the success criteria. And this is important because at the end of the day, this is against with which the customer will decide whether to accept or not the system. And also something else also is there as part of this, which is also called as, some people called as the design drivers. This is also as part of this. This is like philosophies that will drive the design process. Like somebody says that I want to design an automobile which is very eco-friendly or non-polluting, or sustainable, okay, or recyclable, something like this. So, these could be other drivers that could be part of the design philosophy as such. But all these things what we talk about, the stakeholder expectations, gets derived. So, a team literally work on this. So, there is a team that looks into developing what? All of these, okay, and they develop it from the needs and mission statements. So, you require a lot of customer meetings, focus groups. There are so many tools available for this. So, all these tools gets used to derive the stakeholder expectations. Once the stakeholder expectations have reached some level of maturity, then from there, this part we already seen, we derive something called as the high level requirements, and from the high level requirements that gives rise to what we call as the functional and logical decomposition. So, we can if you remember, this is one part of the 4 interdependent, iterative and recursive process. So, the high level requirements is the requirements of the system. These are the system requirements. Okay. And these are high level because we have not the product level specifications are not derived yet. So, you are talking in the bigger terms, okay. You are talking about high level requirements. You are not talking about one specificality of what type of firing pin you will be using in the artillery gun. You might be just talking broadly about a gun that could deliver a round at a distance of 30 kilometers or 50 kilometers or something like that. And from there, we talk about the functional and logical decompositions, where we actually talk about what are the functions that the system will accomplish, and how logical, or the logical way of accomplishing that functions. So, there is a rhyme and a reason how it will the functionality is included in the system. And as I said earlier, that every part in the system should at least support one function. Which function? The function that was derived from part of the stakeholder expectation. This was one of the rules that we have. It can support more than one function, there is nothing wrong in it. More than one desirable, but at least one is the important part. Okay. So, that allows you to, so this gives you the functional analysis of the system. Okay. Once you reach this level where you have a functional and logical decomposition, then we will look into the next sequence of how the operations gets. So, all the things before we are kind of hiding, and there is the other stuff behind this, but we are not discussing that at this point. We already covered that discussion. From there, we get what we call as a iterative design loop. Okay. And this iterative design loop to a large extent is a 3-step process, which has the from the functional and logical decomposition, we derive the design and the product breakdown structure, the PBS and the design breakdown structure. The strawman, so that some of the designs that we would actually get out of this would be called as the strawman architecture. The strawman means something like a very simplified diagram. So, if somebody is asked to drive a human being, the strawman diagram is this. So, this kind of gives that there is a face, there is some sensory organs, 2 hands, 2 legs kind of a thing. So, something like this, a broad idea of what the system design is all about. Okay. From there, it also comes up something called as a CONOPS, or something called as CONOPS stands for concept of operations. We will discuss what is the concept of operations little later down the road. Detailed definitions will be provided. And within this process, we also have the derived and allocated requirements. So, the functional and logical decomposition, the step before this was the high level requirements, HL requirements. So, from there we added the functionality. From the functionality, we derive and allocate requirements, and these requirements include the functional requirements, the performance requirements, then the interface requirements, operation requirements, reliability requirements. There are many other utility requirements. So, the functional requirements to a large extent will be like what are the intended uses of the system. This is the main question that is asked at the time of deriving the functional requirements. What are the main intended uses of the system? So, if you are talking about the field artillery gun, it could be about deliver heavy artillery round. This could be one. Another intended use would be deliver a smoke round to create smoke screen. Okay. And you could talk about even deriving something called as a illumination round for night warfare, something like this. So, these could all be functional aspects of the system, okay, the intended uses. It is not just delivering a heavy artillery round to inflict casualties, it could also deliver these two other things as well. I mean, I am just using simple examples. Now, the performance on the other hand is how will these intended uses be satisfied. So, one of the things that we might do is that the system might perform or deliver heavy artillery round to a distance of approximately 30 kilometer, and the smoke screen round might only deliver up to 20 kilometers, whereas a illumination round might only require up to 5 kilometer. So, all these things are the performance. I mean, just giving one, but there are many aspects of performance. I am just giving you one example. How will the system how will the system be satisfy those functional requirements? The interface is that the how various systems and subsystems will interact. This will be the interface part of the system design. Then that is about operational. Operations means what all conditions and what all aspects. So, operations in a simple way to think about is intended uses and conditions within which those uses happen. This would be the operational aspects of that. And reliability, in this case we can talk about it as how will how good, let us not talk about how good the system do what it is supposed to do under various conditions. So, can it deliver these, can it meet these performance parameters under rain, can it meet under snow, can it meet under dust storm, can it meet under heavy enemy fire. So, all these aspects, how reliable is the system, how even under these different conditions can the system be capable of doing all these aspects. That all these things, when you keep on doing this product from once you have an answer to certain questions, then you have a design, the design and the product breakdown structure happens, and then you will keep on going. So, this is where you might end up drilling down or grouping up. One of these, the recursion might happen down in this area. Okay. And once you have that, then comes the, we will talk about, this is the functional and logical decomposition, and we talked about the iterative design loop. And now we talk about how the iterative design loop, in there we, after that, whatever the output we get out of the iterative design loop, we subject it to something called as the functional and the performance analysis. We try to decide whether the system meets the functional requirements and it is also capable of doing the performance. This could be an independent audit to some extent, and it is usually a decision making process. So, this is a decision making process, okay. And is there enough depth in realizing the functions? So, the question is there enough depth to the functional analysis? Enough depth means sufficient to meet the requirements. If the answer is yes, then you continue. The answer is no, then you do something else. Okay. And similarly, is there enough depth in the performance analysis? This is also the second question, and both questions are part of a decision making process. And if the answer is no, then you decompose or recurse into the next level. So, you go to the next level, you bring the whole thing, the system, take it down to the next level, and again do the functional and logical decomposition, and within which then you start doing that three things that we draw here. Okay. We do this, the design loops, the recursive and iterative process happens, and the iterative design loop, and you do again the functional and performance analysis. Is there enough depth to the functional analysis? Is there enough depth to the performance analysis? The answer is no, you keep on drilling down. So, the drilling down happens, the recursion also happens in the further level in this big loop outside that is shown to you. If the answer is yes, on the other hand, there is enough depth, yes, it can, the functional and performance analysis is deep enough. Then you ask a series of questions. The question is, the first thing is, will the system work? Then, is the system safe to operate? And is the system reliable? Is it able to deliver reliable performance? Is the system cost effective? We can also ask questions like, is the system within schedule of development? This question can also be asked. So, if you have all these questions and you ask this series of questions, if the answer to all of them is yes, all of these are true, if it is correct, then choose that design as the baseline of the system. So, here is you get your system baseline, and if any of the questions answer is no, then we have the question again. I will erase this because I already written on the place where it is not supposed to be, but anyway. So, you have some issues that some of these questions, this system is not able to work, it is not safe to operate, or it is not reliable, it is cost effective, then there is something wrong with your requirements. Okay. Whatever the requirements that you came out from the functional and the logical decomposition, the baseline requirements that you derived out of it, there is something that is not achievable. So, you need to relook into that. You need to relook in. When do you relook this? How do you do? You relook into these decompositions on light of customer or stakeholder expectations. Here we are asking the question, is the we have to look into the functional and logical decomposition, or the requirements need to be rebaselined. So, the rebaseline requirements, if it is the answer is no to this question, then you end up looking at the functional and the logical decompositions. If the answer is yes, there is a need of rebaselining required, then what do? You go back to the stakeholder expectations. You are going back to the drawing board. Okay. Or the question here is, what did the customer say? So, this aspect is looked into it, and then from there again the drilling down through the stakeholder expectations. We had three things that were a part of this, all those stuff will continue as part of here, and then you look into high level functions again. So, you end up rebaselining the requirements because you had a rebaseline, the requirements that you came up with were really not sufficient enough to come up with a baseline system design. So, you need to relook into it. If you think that there is no need for a rebaselining, then you need to look harder at the functional and logical decomposition. What has gone wrong? You need to look into this. Here you might end up taking the help of external experts or something like that. Okay. So, the aim of all these process that we talked about, okay. So, what, as I said earlier, is that we talked about the Strawman architecture, concept of operations and derived requirements. So, we came up with the requirements of the system and we ended up choosing a baseline. The most important aspect of doing all of these things is this one word, consistent, or to achieve consistency. Okay. Consistency among what? Consistency among the Strawman architecture. Okay. So, there is a Strawman architecture, then there is a what you call as a ConOps, and then there is a derived requirements. Okay. All these three, there should be consistency among them. And how do you reach this consistency? Consistency. How? How do you reach that? You require iterations, means you need to repeat the process and you need to make decisions. So, at different juncture, you would make iterations and decisions in a way that all these three are consistent with each other. Okay. So, the final baseline that we choose, this is a consistent with customer expectations or stakeholder expectations. That is the baseline that is being chosen. So, the as I said through earlier that the design team basically understands and define the objectives and the operational concepts. So, the basic key aspect of this. So, you are talking about understanding and defining objectives and operational concepts. So, why do we need to do this? This is necessary, it is necessary to translate the objectives and operational concepts into quality requirements and system requirements over system life cycle. Okay. The life cycle of the system, the quality and the system requirements that is necessary to define the objectives and operational concept of the system. That is what is coming out of one of the aspect of the system design, the key aspect of the system design. It's a complete and second one is the complete and thorough requirement traceability. Why do we need traceability? The traceability is needed for successful validation of the requirements. Okay. So, if the traceability is there, then you can say, can validate the requirements. Okay, I came up with this function, can it be traced? And yes, if it can be traced, that's you use to validate it. And it also ensures that clear and unambiguous requirements are also part of this. The reason, the need for clear and unambiguous requirements is because of this. It avoids misunderstanding, or it's misunderstanding during development of overall systems, and also while making major and minor changes. Okay. So, if it is clear and unambiguous requirements, if they are clear, and then you can there will be no confusion, no misunderstanding during the system development, and as well as there will, while you are making major or minor changes, you will be good to do that. And another key aspect of a system design is to document all decisions during development. So, why do you need to document all these decisions during the development? Because it helps you to make the original design philosophy, design philosophy and the negotiations for decision making, or negotiations during the decision making available for what? For future change assessments or system modifications. So, one of the decisions, let us say we talk about the artillery equipment that we are talking about as an example. One of the decisions that was made at this point was whether the artillery barrel should be smoothbore or should be rifled. So, there was there's trade-off between the smoothbore and the rifled ones. So, at some point of time, let us say that the group or the technical experts or the system team decided to use a rifled barrel. Then why that decision was made, what was the motivation factors behind that decision, that need to be clearly made available, because in the future if they want to make changes to something like this, then they need to know what drove the design, what drove the people to get into that particular rifled barrel design. And as I said earlier, that there are two major terms that we need to discuss or define as part of this. One is called as the stakeholders and other is the CONOPS. So, we will define these terms in light of what we saw, all this kind of all those aspects of the SDP, the modified SDP or the modern SDP, what do you want to call it. So, who is a stakeholder? A stakeholder can be a group or an individual. I apologize for my spellings. You can come up with a good correct spelling. It's a group or an individual. And what are the characteristics of them? Who is affected by or some way accountable for the outcome of the system development. So, it is a group or an individual, either they are affected by the system as such, or somewhere they are responsible for the outcome, the system that the final system that is derived. Stakeholders are typically divided into two. The number one is the customer, and number two is the all other interested parties. Okay. So, who is a customer? The customer is the one who receives the goods or service, and the direct benefits of it. So, the customer is the one who receives the good or service and also the direct benefits associated with it. That is the customer. So, customer is a stakeholder, and all other interested parties, okay, these are the ones who are affected by the project or the system development. This would involve the manufacturers, the subcontractors, the financing agencies, the engineers that are part of this, the design validators, the technical experts, who are all part of the development of the system. So, the stakeholders, the customer, and as well as the people who are participating in fulfilling the customer needs, both falls under the term called stakeholders. And in most of the time, the term customer is used in synonymous to the stakeholders, whereas the other people are the other interested parties are forms a very negligible reference to the group, the word phrase stakeholders. The con ops, or it is a short form of something called concept of operations. What it is that it is a document or something that describes how the system will operate during the life cycle phases to meet stakeholder expectations. So, how will the system operate? How will the system work? So, in a way it is actually describing the system characteristics from an operational standpoint, or an operational standpoint, or you can think about it as an operational perspective. Okay. So, the con ops to a large extent it describes how the system will operate during the life cycle phases to meet stakeholder expectations, and you use the stakeholders or the customer and as well as the other interested parties to derive what we call as the stakeholder expectations. And in that process, what we saw earlier in the previous slide, that this whole loop, the system design process loop, SDP loop, is done to create what we call as a consistent baseline system design, which actually meets the system, the expectations of the stakeholder. With this, today's lecture we will conclude, and we will start into drilling down of how the stakeholder expectations are the tools available to do that. Then we will talk about how the high level requirements and the functional decomposition happens. Then we talk about how do we synthesize the design using few examples and few tools, and then we will conclude by how the system design process or how the system actually gets realized. Thank you very much.